bringing the people behind our food to life.
Our next topic today is transplanting, and we've already prepared our soil, added compost, lime, things like that. Now we're going to be putting plants into the ground. These are all purchase starts. You can definitely grow your own starts, as we discussed in the previous segment. In terms of purchasing starts, there's a couple things to look for. One is healthy plants that are looking nice and green. They aren't spindly, they're not small, they're not yellowish. They look like they're really healthy. The other thing to look for is plants that haven't been sitting in the pots too long, that become really root bound and are therefore not really going to transplant as well. With transplanting, what you really want to do is to think about the current situation, the current condition of the plant, and how you can minimize transplant shock so that when you put it into the ground, the plant won't skip a beat and it'll continue to grow naturally. With herbs, they're going to be your most forgiving kinds of plants to transplant. For example, with the chives here, it's growing in the container. The roots have just begun to fill in and circle around a little bit. This guy right here is just ready to go into the ground. So what we are going to do is to dig a hole that is twice as wide as the depth of the root ball here and as deep. So it's about a 4-inch plug here. We're going to dig our hole and put our chives in so that the top of the chives is at the same level as the existing grade of the soil right here. We are going to use a starting mix of a water-soluble fertilizer here. We're going to water this guy in a little bit so that we're going to provide some nice early nutrients for the plant. We're going to cover it with the soil right here and firm it down right there like that. With herbaceous herbs like sage and thyme, these guys are also relatively easy to transplant, but their root system actually likes a little bit of disturbance. So here the roots have started to grow around inside the pot a little bit here. So that's where using your hori knife and actually cutting the bottom of the roots like that. I'm going to space this at 18 inches apart right there. I'm going to dig my hole that's twice as wide and as deep. And now I'm going to splay these roots out nicely so that it is going to start to grow really quickly. With herbs, all the mint family herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender, sages, etc., they actually like to have their roots disturbed so that they are able to occupy the new planting hole and start growing rapidly. The next kind of plant that we're going to talk about here are plants that form a rosette. And an example would be lettuce right here or broccoli. Both of these kinds of plants, you want to grow one single plant for a head lettuce or a head of broccoli. The spacing is going to be about 18 inches or 2 feet or so. And I'll put my spacing out into the middle here. Again, I'm going to dig the hole. I can use this hoe. This is a Japanese hoe, which is a really nice tool for transplanting because you can make holes nicely. The hori knife also works really well as a trowel to be able to dig planting holes. So I would basically just open up a slot like that. Now, with these, the idea is to be very careful. You don't really want to handle it by the roots or the stem. You want to handle it by the soil right at the top right here. The roots are very delicate. You can see they're just starting to grow into the sides here. And I'm going to put this a little bit deeper than you think. It's going to be about an inch or so below the soil line so that when I bury it, the soil is going to come up to the first set of true leaves. And that way the broccoli will be well supported and it won't have a floppy stem. The lettuce is going to be very similar in that we're going to plant it a little bit up past the crown of the plant onto the first set of true leaves as well. Another transplanting method is used for crops like leeks right here. Leeks and other onion family crops are very hardy, and you can actually go ahead and just tease those out of the soil like that. you're going to want to expose individual plants. So here we have an individual leek right here, and I'm going to use one of these guys, which is a dibbler. The idea with a dibbler is that you just poke a hole in the ground to the depth of the tool, drop the plant in, and then when we water, the soil itself is going to fill around. But the reason we go really deep with the dibbler is because we want to get that really long blanched root of the leek. So all you really need is about an inch or so of the plant actually sticking above the soil surface. And other than that, it is going to be all below the ground, and we'll get a really nice, long, blanched, white root for the leek to grow. If you don't have a tool like this, you could also use the back of your hoe or trowel like that. Again, you're just dropping the plants in such that when we water, that's going to fill in the soil around them. The last type of plant I'd like to talk about with transplanting are ones like tomatoes that form adventitious roots, meaning everywhere along the stem that's buried with a tomato plant is going to sprout into a new root system, as opposed to the rosettes that the broccoli and the lettuce form right down there. So with this tomato, this is a sun gold cherry tomato, we can basically either nip off or use a pair of pruners to remove many of the branches that are already growing on this plant, because we're going to bury the stem quite deeply so that we get a really robust root system of the plant. So I would go ahead and trim off even up to that one right there and plant the plant all the way that deep into the ground. So there's just a very little bit of one set of leaves sticking above the ground. All of this stem right here will form roots. A really strong root system is going to form a strong, healthy plant that's going to produce a lot of fruit later in the season. So in planting tomatoes with this method, typically I like to use a post hole digger to make a nice deep hole going down into the ground. And I'm just going to finish it off here like so. And go ahead and move those to the side. Now, with this 4-inch pot, again, I'm going to use my water solution or starter solution to really saturate the root system. It's best to plant a wet root system into wet soil. And one way you can do that is by dipping it in, submerging it, and letting it bubble out. That way we know that the root system is nice and saturated. We pull it on out, and we're going to go ahead and gently drop the plant down into the hole and fill the hole with the soil that's here and bring it up to the original grade. So that root system that is going to get established is going to be about 18 inches. And then ultimately when the tomato plant grows, they have very deep root systems that go 5-6 feet down into the ground. Another way you can transplant tomatoes, in that we're going to want to remove the branches off the side of the plant all the way up to the top. And we're also going to want to soak our root system. These are early girl tomatoes. In general, for Western Oregon, choosing tomato varieties that ripen on the earlier side is a really good idea. So we're bubbling out all of the air from the root mass. We're pulling it out. And now with this method, we're just going to dig a shallow trench, as I've already done right here. And we're going to lay the tomato on its side. And then bury the stem to the point of just having the crown right above here. Now with this method, it's useful to mark where the original root system is, maybe with the plant tag itself, and that way when we're weeding at a later date, we won't damage the roots. The advantage of using this particular system is that the roots are really close to the surface. It's still going to form a really long root system, but because they're closer to the soil surface, the soil temps are a little bit warmer, and it's going to probably kick into growing just a little bit faster than this guy over here that's buried deeply into a vertical column like that. And then once these start to grow, we're going to trellis them, and that's going to be the topic of the next segment. With transplanting, you want to think about the growth pattern of the plant. You want to plant it to the correct depth, and you want to make sure that you're putting a wet plant into wet ground, and your plants are going to prosper that way.